Ben Shapiro, known for his razor-sharp intellect and no-nonsense debating style, has made a name for himself dismantling liberal talking points and confronting mainstream narratives. In his most recent critique, Shapiro turned his attention to The View, a talk show he has long criticized as an intellectual sinkhole. This time, his focus was on Whoopi Goldberg, a long-standing panelist on the show, whose controversial comments have repeatedly put her in the spotlight. The confrontation was as much a clash of ideologies as it was a reflection of the growing divide in modern political discourse, and the fallout has left everyone buzzing. Shapiro began by highlighting Whoopi's now infamous comments about the Holocaust, where she claimed it wasn't about race, but man's inhumanity to man. To Shapiro, a Jewish man deeply connected to the historical significance of the Holocaust, this statement was not only inaccurate, but also a gross distortion of one of the most racially motivated genocides in history. He wasted no time calling out the absurdity of Whoopi's remarks, pointing out that the Nazis specifically targeted Jews based on their race, not their religion. According to Shapiro, Whoopi's comments trivialized the suffering of millions and revealed a shocking lack of understanding about one of the darkest chapters in human history. For Shapiro, this wasn't just ignorance. It was dangerous misinformation being broadcast to millions of viewers. Whoopi's Holocaust remarks were just the tip of the iceberg for Shapiro, who took aim at her broader commentary on race, politics, and history. He described The View as a platform that promotes poorly fact-checked liberal narratives, often at the expense of nuance or intellectual rigor. Shapiro didn't mince words, calling the panelists low IQ idiots who use their platform to push divisive rhetoric rather than engage in meaningful discussions. For him, Whoopi embodies everything wrong with the show: unsubstantiated claims, inflammatory rhetoric, and a complete disregard for factual accuracy. One of the moments that particularly infuriated Shapiro was Whoopi's comparison of the U.S. and Israel to terrorist organizations like Hamas and the Taliban. Shapiro found this comparison not only outrageous, but deeply offensive, given the long-standing alliance between the U.S. and Israel in combating terrorism. He accused Whoopi of moral equivalence, equating democracies with groups that openly promote violence and extremism. To Shapiro, this was yet another example of how The View spreads misinformation under the guise of progressive commentary. Shapiro also turned his attention to Whoopi's remarks about abortion, where she lashed out at men for having opinions on the issue. "Do any of you men have eggs or the possibility of carrying a fetus? How dare you talk about what a fetus wants?" Whoopi exclaimed during a heated segment. Shapiro, never one to shy away from controversy, dissected her argument with his usual blend of logic and sarcasm. He pointed out the glaring contradictions in Whoopi's statement, noting that by her own logic, postmenopausal women or women unable to conceive would also have no right to weigh in on abortion, a stance he described as both absurd and exclusionary. Shapiro also took issue with Whoopi's stance on gender and trans issues, highlighting the inherent contradictions in her arguments. If liberal ideologies are supposed to be inclusive, Shapiro argued, then how can Whoopi exclude certain groups from discussions about critical issues like abortion? He accused her of transphobia for suggesting that only those with eggs could have opinions on reproductive rights, a comment he described as not only hypocritical, but also emblematic of the incoherence in progressive rhetoric. The crux of Shapiro's critique, however, was not just about Whoopi, but about The View as a whole. He described the show as a circus, where panelists prioritize sensationalism over substance and rely on emotional appeals rather than logical arguments. Shapiro noted that the show's format discourages intellectual independence, with panelists often ganging up on anyone who dares to challenge the prevailing narrative. This, he argued, creates an echo chamber that fuels political polarization and stifles meaningful dialogue. One of the most striking aspects of Shapiro's critique was his focus on the cultural impact of The View. He argued that the show's tendency to push divisive narratives contributes to the broader societal divide, making it harder for people to engage in constructive conversations about important issues. Shapiro expressed particular frustration with how the show frames complex topics like race and history, accusing the panelists of oversimplifying these issues to fit their ideological agenda. Shapiro also took aim at Joy Behar, another prominent panelist on The View. He criticized her for perpetuating harmful stereotypes under the guise of advocacy, particularly in her discussions about race and privilege. Shapiro argued that Behar's well-intentioned but misguided comments often do more harm than good, reinforcing the very biases she claims to oppose. For example, Behar's claim that young people don't learn about slavery or Jim Crow in school was met with skepticism by Shapiro, who pointed out that these topics are staples of American history education. Shapiro's critique wasn't limited to the panelists' comments. It extended to the very structure of The View as a talk show. He argued that the show's format prioritizes entertainment over enlightenment, with panelists more focused on generating headlines than fostering genuine understanding. This, he said, makes The View less of a platform for meaningful discourse and more of a spectacle designed to provoke outrage. Despite his harsh criticism, Shapiro acknowledged the cultural influence of The View, describing it as a barometer of mainstream liberal thought. However, he cautioned that the show's lack of intellectual rigor and penchant for divisive rhetoric risk alienating viewers who crave more balanced and thoughtful discussions. Shapiro argued that The View has the potential to be a powerful platform for bridging ideological divides, but only if it moves away from its current trajectory. Shapiro's commentary has resonated with his audience, many of whom share his frustration with the state of mainstream media. His critique of The View highlights broader concerns about the role of media in shaping public opinion and the need for greater accountability among high-profile commentators. For Shapiro, the problems with The View are not just about individual panelists like Whoopi Goldberg or Joy Behar. They reflect deeper issues within the media landscape as a whole. While Shapiro's critique has drawn praise from his supporters, it has also sparked backlash from those who view his comments as overly harsh or dismissive. Critics argue that Shapiro's approach lacks empathy and fails to acknowledge the value of diverse perspectives. However, Shapiro has defended his stance, insisting that his critique is rooted in a desire for more honest and constructive dialogue. As the debate over The View continues, Shapiro's critique serves as a reminder of the challenges facing modern media. In an era of polarized politics and fragmented audiences, finding common ground has never been more difficult. Shapiro's call for greater accountability and intellectual honesty is a timely one, urging both media creators and consumers to demand more from the platforms that shape public discourse.